Actually, I could move here. Okay. Here we go. Welcome back, everyone, to our journey into the Talmud, Masechet Pesachim. We're very excited. And those of you who are new, I just wanted to ask if you could share just a little bit, like, have you learned Talmud before? Is this new for you? Is this not new for you? You guys can start because you're here. I'm just curious to know, like, who's in the room.
I did a 3-week course at Drisha a long time ago. So
Okay.
That's the basics.
That's the basics. Okay, that's a great start. Nothing. Amazing. Okay, well, welcome. And those of you who are new online, any do you have any past experience, no experience?
I've learned with Michelle Farber and Ranana from
Okay. She's
Renee,
a
you're so lucky.
she's a pretty important person to learn Talmud with.
she's a good friend, and when I was in Israel, I attended her classes in the morning. Yeah, it's pretty,
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to share? No pressure, but if you want to just share a little bit about your background, I'd love to know. No?
I spent a few months at Nishmat where I did some introductory level Gemara.
Awesome. Okay, great. Good.
Learned in high school and was listening to podcasts on Daf Yomi for a while.
Awesome. Okay. And Aviva, I know you learn and Netivot, right? Awesome. And Gail, how about you? You're muted.
Yours was the first class I took.
Awesome. Okay, great. So let's jump right back in. And last class we saw the Mishnah, and we saw, if you look at your sheets again, just read over. You can look at the elucidated version on page 3 of the Mishnah. We saw how when you read that, everything seems very clear, but it wasn't so obvious how we got there. When we read the raw version of the Mishnah, it was raw. It was really hard to decipher how to break up the sentences, what different terms mean, what the ideas are behind them. So the Rashi helped us understand some of the ideas, and just in general, just seeing that there's a lot of interpretation here within this version, this really translation of the Mishnah. Now we get to jump right into the Gemara, and just a review of what Gemara is. So the Mishnah was really the first compilation of oral Torah that was written down, Torah Shabbal Tech. It was written down by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. And they were all, as we mentioned last time, they were all just memorized conversations that were floating around, and Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi gathered all of them and he compiled all of them and put them in the Mishnah. And it seemed like at first this was going to be it, right? He wrote everything down, great, everything's going to be super clear. But all these conversations then ensued. There was then debate, there was another layer of oral law about the Mishnah. And that turns into the Gemara. It's the analysis, it's the further discussion of the Mishnah. A later generation doing it. So let's jump in. So go back to the raw version, okay? Don't go to the elucidated version yet. It's not going to be fun that way. Okay, go back to page 2. Go back to the Gemara on page 2. Let's have a volunteer. Anybody want to read for us? We're gonna read the first paragraph of the Gemara. Tavita, can I call on you?
Sure.
Great.
The Gemara, not the Mishnah.
Yeah, the first paragraph of the Mishnah. So it's the second paragraph on the page, on page 2.
Why discuss particularly eves of Passover, even eves of Shabbat and festivals? It is also as it was taught, a person not eat on the eves of Shabbat and festivals from Mincha onward, so that he will enter Shabbat when he has a desire. The statement of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef says, one continues eating until dark.
All right, that's quite a statement. Does anyone have any idea where to punctuate? Now, let me just frame for a minute the challenge that we're facing. If we were doing this in the original, which you're welcome to if you want, it's on the first page, it's the original. Not only would we have no punctuation, but we would also have Aramaic. The Mishnah is mostly in Hebrew, which is more understandable to a lot of people than Aramaic. So it's just another layer of challenge. We don't have that now because I gave the translation, but it's just another layer. So let's now try to figure out where would you put the first major punctuation here?
Question mark after Passover. The first
Okay, why discuss particular ease of Passover? Okay, so Naomi's saying after Passover. Okay, so let's try to figure out then what is the question here? What is the Gemara really asking here?
Why are we only talking about, like, not, like what I was saying before, like there's also Shabbos and Yom Tov that are important, but why are we only talking about Pesach?
Okay, why are we only talking about Pesach, Shabbos, and Yom Tov also? Now, what aspect do you think we're talking about? Let's look back to the Mishnah. What aspect of the Mishnah do you think it's asking about here? Okay, a person not eat until dark. Okay, so let's read what the Gemara is doing. Why discuss particular eves of Passover? Even eves of Shabbat and festivals, it is also. So Naomi is saying it is also fill in the blank, not permitted until dark, as it was taught. A person not eat on the eves of Shabbat and festivals from Mincha onward, so that he will enter Shabbat when he has a desire. The statement of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi says one continues eating until dark. Okay, a few pieces to add here. First of all, you wouldn't know this from the translation, but as it was taught is a particular word that's used. If any of you have learned Gemara, want to look in the original, the word is Titania. And that means as it was taught in a Breita. A Breita is not something we've spoken about yet in this class. Anyone know what a Breita is? Anyone else? Yeah, it's been years. Sounds familiar, right? Okay, so Breita is actually the same time period as the Mishnah, but it was just a statement that wasn't included in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, for whatever reason, didn't include it in. But it has the same level of authority. It's from the same time period, from the same teachers, the same rabbis. So the Gemara very often quotes a Breita to challenge the Mishnah, to show that there's a conflicting idea. Sometimes it will also bring it to corroborate, to support, but often it brings it to challenge or to further complicate whatever is mentioned in the Mishnah. So what does the Breita say? So first of all, let's just figure out, where does the Breita begin and end? Where would you put the quotations? So where would you start it? Feel free to just call out. This is this is an interactive class, so feel free to just turn on your mics and just call out at any point.
A person, not
Okay, a person. So let's start with a person as it was taught. Quote, a person not eat. Okay, now where does it end? Okay, so Davida says desire. You say onward. Where's on? Okay. Anyone else have any guesses? Where does it end? Where does the Breita end?
the statement of Rabbi Yossi says.
So Rabbi Yossi says, period.
No, at the end of dark. The statement of Rabbi Yossi says one continues until dark.
Okay. Rena's got it, our beginner over here. Yeah, the Breita goes all the way until dark. So that is the quote. That is the entire source that we're quoting. Now, why are we quoting this Breita? What is the Gemara trying to get from this source? How does this source support our question? Okay, now let's actually break down the Breita. There are two opinions in the Breita. The first opinion is by who? I'll read the Breita. I'll read the Breita again because it's a little bit of an awkward presentation, but this is very common in Mishnah.
Two different people. I'm Rabbi Yossi. Are they two different or one person?
Okay, all right, Naomi, your experience is treating you well. Okay, so let me read it again. A person not eat on the eves of Shabbat and festivals from Mincha onward, so that he will enter Shabbat when he has a desire, the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. There's a period there, right? The statement of Rabbi Yehuda is saying what we just read was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi is now the next opinion. Rabbi Yossi says one continues until dark. So there are two opinions in the Breita. Rabbi Yehuda says on Shabbat and on Chagim, don't eat until dark because we want you to have a desire when you enter those days. And Rabbi Yossi says you can eat until dark. Which opinion of the Breita do you think we care about here? Naomi, spot on today. Okay. Right? that the Rabbi Yehuda, because why? Just flesh it out for us. Why do we only care about Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, seemingly? But yeah, for sure. But which, like, why does Rabbi Yehuda's opinion important for us and not Rabbi Yossi? Because let's look back at our question. Why discuss particularly Eves of Passover? Even Eves of Shabbat and festivals, it is also taught, right? We're trying to prove that this law of not eating until dark even exists for Shabbat and festivals. How do we see that it exists for Shabbat and festivals? Look at the Breita, look at Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda clearly says that for Shabbat and festivals, you should wait until dark. So if we just understand the question, the Gemara is asking, what is so special about Pesach? Remember, look back at the Mishnah. The eve of Passover, a person should not eat until dark.
It's a kal v'chomer, kind of like, if we do it for the rest of the time, so certainly for Pesach, we should do it because we're so much more careful for Pesach.
Okay, that's an interesting point. A kal v'chomer, meaning it's if we do it for something less strict, then of course we do it for something more strict. Definitely a valid point. But you could see how this could be quite confusing, because if you read this Mishnah, what might you think about Shabbat and Chagim, about Shabbat and festivals?
You think that you have to mention this thing about Pesach because it's special and different.
You might imply from that something special about Pesach, that Pesach is unique. So it's if this is really true for Shabbat and Chagim too, then it's strange that the Mishnah portrays it as that it's something unique for Pesach, and all the more so, Renee, the same idea that if Pesach is so much more stringent,
Right.
we couldn't learn about Shabbat and Chagim from that because it's more stringent.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on the Gemara's question? All we've done so far is just describe the Gemara's question. Does anybody want me to review it? Say it again. Thumbs up if you followed. Just gotta take the temperature a little bit. I do this. I'm so used to Zooming with my students, like you know. So you just do this automatically.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Rabbi Yossi says one continues eating until dark. That's still talking about Shabbat and festivals. It's not going back to Pesach at that point, right?
Okay, so it's a good point. Yeah, that's the continuation of the Breita. So it's about Shabbat and festivals.
Okay.
So Liora, you actually bring me to a good point. What would Rabbi Yossi say about our Mishnah? This is a question for all of you. What would Rabbi Yossi say about our Mishnah?
It would be different for Pesach than for Shabbat and festivals.
So let's throw out all the possibilities. We have Rabbi Yossi, who seems to say that for Shabbat and festivals, you don't have to wait until dark to eat. And our Mishnah says that you do have to wait until dark to eat. So how could we reconcile these two? How could we possibly figure out how these two relate? So Liora, do you want to just say that again or just clarify?
Well, I'm speculating there that Rabbi Yossi says, well, this is why Pesach is unique and different in this way. Because for Shabbat and festivals, we can continue to eat until dark, but here it's saying that the Mishnah says you do not. So this is something special about Pesach, which is different than Rabbi Yehuda, who is asking, why do we particularly discuss it? Because we know we do this for Shabbat and festivals. So that seems to be it.
So what you're saying is that Rabbi Yossi would say that there's a difference between Pesach and other times. Okay. Any other possibilities of how Rabbi Yossi could relate to this Mishnah? If you were to take Shabbat and festivals literally, then what would that imply about his opinion?
That Pesach isn't a festival?
Oh, okay, Pesach and festival. I wasn't going to go there, but that's a possibility. There's another option that no one's even entertaining. I'm going to give us one more minute to try to think of one other possibility. If Pesach is included in festivals, then maybe he disagrees with the Mishnah. That's another possibility no one has mentioned here. Can he disagree with the Mishnah? Excellent question. He's a later generation. Well, no, he's not. Sorry, my bad, because he's in a Breita. He's the same generation as the Mishnah. So in fact, he's equal authority to the opinions in the Mishnah. So that's another possibility. These are all the questions that are lingering for us. We don't exactly know how Rabbi Yossi is going to relate. Any other questions before we move on? Thoughts, comments? No? Okay. One more detail that I want to just, actually two more details that I want to just mention before we move on, is that first of all, we see that the Breita here mentions, why can't you eat before, why does Rabbi Yehuda think you shouldn't eat on Shabbat or festivals until dark? So that you have a desire. That, look in our Mishnah, does it say anything about that in our Mishnah? About having desire? No. Does anyone remember though, where did we see that idea? You can look back at what we did last week. Where did we see that idea of eating with desire?
With the hearty appetite, they added that.
Okay, so you're looking at the elucidated version, but yeah, but the question is, where did they get that from? Look at our sources, look at the raw version and then the commentary below that.
Rashi.
Yeah, Rashi, right? The second commentary of Rashi, second comment of Rashi, said he will eat matzah of mitzvah with appetite. And the question that many people often ask about Rashi is, where did he get his ideas from? How did he know to interpret the Mishnah like that? And you see here that this is one place that Rashi gets his commentary from. He learns the Gemara that's later on, and he then puts it back into the Mishnah. So that is a very clear example of where Rashi didn't just make it up based on his own ideas, he based it on the continuation of the Gemara. Okay, the other piece that I just want to explain to you before we move on to the Gemara's answer is this concept of mincha. We mentioned it very briefly last class. What does that mean from mincha onward? When is that? When is mincha? Anyone know? Just before sunset. Okay. So what are you assuming mincha is a reference to? Okay. Okay. Well, mincha. What is mincha? Just most obviously. What when you think of mincha, what do you think of? Afternoon davening, right? You probably, most people probably think of the mincha prayer, the tefillat mincha. But what is tefillat mincha actually based on? So korbanot, right? All of our tefillot were originally based on korbanot. We gave the korban tamid every single day, the daily sacrifice, one in the morning, tamid shel shacharit, and one in the afternoon, tamid shel ben harbayim, was the afternoon daily sacrifice. When in the afternoon did the Kohanim bring this sacrifice? Anyone know? So let me just give you a little bit of background on how time works in the Jewish calendar. And you should ask Isla about this because we learned this in our class. So the way it works is that we take the hours, all daylight hours, and we divide it into 12. We take all nighttime hours and we divide it into 12. Now it's always going to change because depending on what season it is, that's going to be longer or shorter. An hour can stretch or can decrease, right? It's like a relative hour. And so when I speak about hours now, I'm speaking about relative hours, not actually precisely hours, but it's going to change based on the day. So the korban mincha, the daily sacrifice in the afternoon, was usually brought at 9.5 hours into the day. So that means that from the beginning of the day, around daybreak, sunrise, it's like a little complicated exactly when, 9.5 hours. So take the 12 hours and divide it, take the all daylight divided into 12 and count 9.5. That's when the korban mincha was usually given. And it was allowed to be given until, well, it's a machloket, but the opinion we follow is until 12 hours into the day, which is why, right, when we say mincha, today, when we daven, when we pray, you're allowed to say mincha until nightfall, until sunset. Right, sunset, not really nightfall. You're right, sunset, right? But the question is, when was the earliest time that you were allowed to bring the korban mincha? Usually it was brought at 9.5 hours, but it actually was allowed to be brought at 6.5 hours into the day. There was only one day a year when it was actually brought that early. Nope. Yeah. Do you know why? Because what else was going on the 14th of Nisan? Okay, true, but something that we don't do today, but that was very consuming for the Kohanim. So it was the Korban Pesach. And it wasn't just one sacrifice given. Every family brought a Korban Pesach. It was a zoo. There was so much to do. So on that day, we said they brought the Korban Mincha at 6.5 hours into the day earlier. So we have this window of time in the afternoon. So and there's the terms that are used to get a little technical. There's a term Mincha Gedola, the great Mincha, which is at 6.5 hours, and Mincha Ketana, which is at 9.5 hours. And so when the Mishnah says and the Gemara says Mincha, we actually don't know which one it's referring to. Is it referring to 6.5 hours into the day or 9.5 hours into the day? We actually don't know. So that's again going to be another question that we're going to add to our list of questions. Anyone want any clarification or questions on that piece here, just the timing here? All right, so let's move on. Let's read Rav Huna's statement. Rina, do you want to read for us?
Rav Huna said, was necessary only according to Rabbi Yossi, who said one continue eating until dark. This applies on the eves of Shabbat and festivals, but on the eve of Passover, due to the obligation of matzah, he concedes.
When we originally read the Braita, we thought that we really only cared about Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But Rav Huna is saying, no, you have to pay attention to Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Yossi is saying that there's a difference here. There's a difference here between Pesach and the other holidays. Other holidays, do whatever you want. Eat whenever you want. It doesn't matter. Pesach is unique. So therefore, on Pesach, how does he relate to this Mishnah? What would he say about this Mishnah? Would he agree or disagree? He would agree. He would support this Mishnah. Pesach's unique. Pesach is unique. In this situation, in this aspect of Pesach, it's not considered a festival. It's a different festival. It's an exception to the rule. It's an exception. Or why is it an exception? How does he explain why is there an exception here?
Because of the matzah.
The obligation of matzah. Yeah, is anyone going to say something?
No, same thing about the matzah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, that there's this obligation of matzah. He doesn't say specifically a desire. I think maybe it's assumed, but he's somehow, because we have a special obligation of matzah, don't eat until dark. So what this would mean is the answer to the Gemara is that this Mishnah is really only coming to teach us about Rabbi Yossi's opinion, because Rabbi Yehuda would always agree about this. This is really only teaching us a new idea. The word is chidush or chidush would only be teaching us a new idea for Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda, there's no difference. Questions, responses to this answer? What do you think? Do you like it? Do you find it compelling? Any thoughts?
Is Rav Huna saying that the Mishnah is talking to Rav Yossi and not really talking to Rav Yehuda? So the Mishnah is like a Rav Yossi supporter.
Okay, so you're bringing up a good question. Does this mean that the Mishnah is following la halacha for the law? Is it following Rabbi Yossi? It definitely suggests that, right? Because it doesn't have to be. You could say that maybe it's leaving it open. Because at the end of the day, does Rabbi Yehuda also agree with this Mishnah? They both agree with it. So it's not really taking a side. You're right that maybe it's pointing in that direction because it's teaching something new only for Rabbi Yossi, but it's not necessarily telling us who we agree with. That's a good point, though. Any other thoughts? Now, note, does Rabbi Yossi is not actually speaking here, because this is now Rav Huna, who's already a later generation. He's now speaking in the Gemara itself. So this is all guessing, right? We don't actually know, does Rabbi Yossi say this or not? But this is what the rabbis in the Gemara are doing. They're trying to take their best guesses at what these earlier rabbis could have said. Let's now see a second answer. Rav Papa. Naomi, want to take it away?
Sure. Rav Papa said, even if you say Rabbi Yehuda, there on the eves of Shabbat and festivals from Mincha onward, that it is prohibited adjacent to Mincha. It is permitted, however, on the eve of Passover, even adjacent to Mincha, it is also prohibited.
Okay, so it was very wordy, confusing statement, right? Rabbi said, even if you say Rabbi Yehuda, so what do you think, before we even understand the details, what do you think Rav Papa's trying to do here? Just from those words alone, even if you say Rabbi Yehuda.
Say by Rabbi Yehuda.
What do you mean by, what do you mean?
Like, if you're saying according to, if you're agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda, you're taking his position, then.
Okay, so even if you agree with Rabbi Yehuda, then, so we're back to our original problem. Because if we follow Rabbi Yehuda, then we're back to our problem of why does the Mishnah specify that you can't do this on Pesach, you can't do this any Shabbat or holiday? We're back to our original question. So what is he saying? Let's read it to ourselves again.
What did we say last time, adjacent then?
Oh, we didn't say. Well, we read Rashi. Rashi said a little before Mincha. We didn't clarify.
Well, it said the difference is only adjacent to Mincha, it is permitted. They're in the middle, but then it says again it's prohibited. So it's adjacent to Mincha as opposed to onward from Mincha.
Okay, so you're onto something. They're on the Eve of Shabbat festival from Mincha onward is prohibited. Okay, so there's actually a very important punctuation there. It's going to be very hard to read without it. Can anyone try to piece it together?
They're on the eve of Shabbat on. That is prohibited, period. Adjacent to Mincha, it is permitted, however.
This is hard. Imagine if this was also in Aramaic and you're doing this.
After the
I'm gonna challenge you all. Let's figure this out. Anyone have an idea either what it's trying to say or how you would punctuate it? Yeah, what would you say, Davida?
Period after the first Mincha. They are on the eves of Shabbat and festivals from Mincha onward, that it's prohibited adjacent to Mincha. It is permitted, however, on the eve of Passover, even adjacent to Mincha. And it is also permitted.
Anyone, any other final stabs? Okay, I'll give you a little hint. Put a comma after the first prohibited on the second line. Put a comma there after that. And then put a period before however. Now read it. Now see if you can make some sense of it.
That makes more sense, yeah.
Okay, so do you want to explain for us what is Rav Papa's answer?
He's saying that Pesach is different, and that you can't eat even if it's close to Mincha, even if it's adjacent to Mincha. There's no room.
Okay, as opposed to on just Shabbat and festivals, when do you have to stop eating?
Are they're on the eves of Shabbat and festival from Mincha onward, that is prohibited, comma, adjacent to Mincha, it is permitted. There's two, from Mincha is prohibited and up to Mincha, but in other words, Pesach is stricter.
Okay.
Pesach is stricter, and he's saying that from Mincha onward, for the festival, for Shabbat and Yom Tov, from Mincha onward, absolutely, it's prohibited. But adjacent to Mincha, you could be a little bit more lenient.
Okay, good.
Passover, even on close to Mincha, it's prohibited. I mean, it just shows he says that Pesach is in its own category. It's a little stricter.
Okay, exactly. So on regular Fridays and regular days before a holiday, you can eat until mincha. But on Pesach, you have to stop eating adjacent to mincha. Okay, we don't know what that is, but
Right.
it's even earlier. For those of you who, the Hebrew is samuch lemincha, not just mincha, samuch lemincha, even close to mincha. Now, again, we don't know what that is, but the point is that Rav Papa is saying that even for Rabbi Yehuda, this Mishnah is teaching something new. Pesach is unique, right? Our original question was, how is Pesach unique? We have this restriction all the time. For Rabbi Yossi, it's for sure unique. And even for Rabbi Yehuda, you can say it is unique. Now I'm going to throw out just before actually I throw out another question. Any clarification questions or comments just on Rav Papa's answer? Do you think that Rav Papa is disagreeing with Rav Huna?
Yeah, because he says only. Rav Huna says only. Like that Mishnah was necessary only in order to talk to Rabbi Yehuda.
Only according to Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so you think Rav Huna is only saying that the Mishnah is only for Rabbi Yossi, and Rav Papa is saying it can even be for Rabbi Yehuda. Any other thoughts on that question? Okay, so it's definitely makes sense what you're saying. It is possible that they don't disagree. Rav Papa is maybe just adding another, taking it further. You know, that Rav Huna, you're just being a little bit limited. You could even say that he's teaching something new for Rabbi Yehuda. It's possible. It's possible. Which answer do you guys find more convincing? No idea.
Well, the Rav Papa one makes sense.
Rav Papa makes sense. Does Rav Huna make sense to you? What would you say are some of the pros and cons of either of the answers? Like if you were to debate this, right? If you were the next line in the Gemara and you have to answer, well, which one do we follow?
In any case, it sounds like you just can't eat on Pesach.
Okay, so you are right that there's no practical difference in terms of Pesach. Everyone agrees that on Pesach, you cannot eat samach lemincha. When is this going to have practical application? For what case?
5 minutes between adjacent and onward.
So what you're assuming 5 minutes, but whatever that time frame is for, not for Pesach, but for Shabbat and festivals, right? This is what's called a nafka mina. Anyone heard the term nafka mina? It's a practical difference, a common term that's used in Gemara study, that to really understand the nuances between two opinions, you have to see when is it practically going to matter? When are you going to see these differences play out? So you would see it, the nafka mina here would be on Shabbat and on holidays. Do you need to stop eating adjacent to mincha or at mincha? Again, we haven't defined in how much time that is, but that is a difference. That is a difference. Good?
Makes me hungry.
Makes you hungry. Are you hungry for
I'm
matzah?
not gonna get my matzah.
You can't wait for matzah. Go now to page 3, to the elucidated version. Let's read now. It's going to be so beautiful to read the elucidated version now. Somebody online want to read for us? Liora, you're at the top of my screen. Do you want to read for us?
Okay. On the eve of Passover, adjacent.
You can actually just start from the Gemara because we did the Mishnah last time.
Right,
So
of
start
course.
from the Gemara. Yeah.
Why discuss this halacha particularly with regard to the eves of Passover? Even on the eves of Shabbat and other festivals, it is also prohibited to eat in the late afternoon. As it was taught in the Baraita, a person should not eat on the eves of Shabbat and festivals from Mincha time onward, so that he will enter Shabbat when he has a desire to eat, and he will enjoy the Shabbat meal. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says one continues eating until dark.
Okay. Who wants
You
to
are
take
we
over?
stopping there?
Sorry.
Oh, should I continue or are we
Oh.
stopping there?
Well, let's have someone else read the next paragraph, and then someone will read the third one. Anyone want to jump in? Roni, can I call on you? Oh, Renee, go for it.
Rav Huna said the Mishnah was necessary only according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. who said that one may continue eating until dark. According to his opinion, the Mishnah is necessary to emphasize that this applies only on the eves of Shabbat and festivals. But on the eve of Passover, due to the obligation to eat matzah, Rav Yossi concedes that one must refrain from eating in the afternoon so that he will eat matzah with a good appetite.
Great, thank you. And let's have one more reader. Ronit, I tried to call on you before. Do you want to take it?
Sure.
Great.
Sure. Rav Papa said, even if you say that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, there is still a difference between the eves of Shabbat and other festivals as compared with the eve of Passover. There, on the eves of Shabbat and other festivals, it is only from Mincha time onward that it is prohibited to eat, but adjacent to Mincha time, it is permitted. However, on the eve of Passover, even adjacent to Mincha time, it is also prohibited to eat. For this reason, the Mishnah is referring specifically to the eve of Passover.
So again, I'm just going to reiterate the same point I made last class. If you just read this, it wouldn't seem so difficult, but this is really has a lot of interpretation and elaboration that's not in the original version. So you get to experience a little bit of what it means to learn from the raw text. Turn over to the final page of the sheet. So what do we do with all this information? We have these opinions, we have this Mishnah, we have these different comments in the Gemara, and the conversation goes on. I only gave you a little snippet of it. All right. Now, what do we do? How does this play out in our lives? And so the process of learning Gemara, often it's a journey. It doesn't just end there. There are many commentaries, and then there are a lot of codes of law that try to tease out how does this play out into our lives. The most famous one is the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rav Yosef Karo in the 16th century. And much of our law today is based on him. He wasn't writing conversations like the Mishnah and Gemara. He was writing the final law. Let's see what he says. Someone who hasn't read for us, do you want to start reading for us? Roberta, do you want to read for us?
Just unmute.
Yeah, you're muted. You're still
There you
muted.
go.
Okay.
Okay. It is forbidden to establish a meal with drink on Shabbat Eve that is not typical during the week, even if it is a wedding, for the sake of honoring Shabbat, so that one can enter Shabbat with appetite to eat. And all day there is a prohibition. A feast for a Brit Milah, or redeeming of the firstborn son, is allowed, and this is the practice. And one is allowed to eat and drink without a formal feast, even if it is a meal that is typical during the week. During the whole day, one can start at any point during the day according to the strict law, but it is a mitzvah to refrain from establishing a feast that is typical during the week from 9 hours and on.
Okay. So let's see what we have here. Do you think that that the Shulchan Aruch is agreeing with Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that on Shabbat and festivals you can't eat until you can't eat from Mincha onwards, and Rabbi Yossi said you can. So he says a number of ideas, which gets a little confusing. At the beginning, he says you can't establish a meal that is more than what you would usually have during the week on before Shabbat on Friday, all day. And without that, if it's less than what you would have during the week or equal to, then you're allowed to. You're allowed to have it. However, it's a nice idea. It's a mitzvah to refrain from doing this from 9 hours and on. So you're not allowed to have a really elaborate feast. You can have a feast that's typical of during the week. However, nice idea to not do it from 9 hours and on. What do you think? Do you think he's agreeing with Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda?
Probably Rabbi Yehuda then.
Because he's saying that you can't have a, well, okay.
Well,
so
because he doesn't want you to eat till dark, right? And Rabbi Yossi says, well, sure, you can go ahead and and eat.
Okay, so here's where it gets tricky between possibly the ideal versus the technical letter of the law. According to the letter of the law, are you allowed to eat? Are you allowed to have a feast? Are you allowed to eat on Friday before Shabbat? Till when? Till whenever you want, right? If you look back at the Breitzer where it talks about Rabbi Yossi, it says, where Rabbi Yehuda, it says a person should not eat. Now to me, that doesn't sound like Rabbi Yehuda.
Less Rabbi Yehuda meant you should just not eat. Less feasts.
Okay, so there again, you have to interpret. Was Rabbi Yehuda talking about a feast, or was he talking about just eating? Right. Now, we didn't do the whole Gemara. If you continued on in the Gemara, you would see that we actually follow Rabbi Yossi. That is the law. So the Shulchan Aruch is working with Rabbi Yossi's opinion. And so if you work with Rabbi Yossi's opinion, technically you're allowed to eat all day. Should you try not to? Right, what he's saying at the end is you should still try not to from 9 hours and on. Now, why does he mention 9 hours? Where does that come from, 9 hours?
And the korban.
The carbon
Mincha.
The korban, right? This is what we call mincha ketana, the later time of mincha. However, it's actually a little bit earlier than mincha ketana. So
9 hours instead of 9.5.
9.5 hours, right? So, which is, 9 hours instead of 9.5 hours. So it seems like he's following Rabbi Yossi. However, he then also says that you can't have a feast. So he's taking it a bit further, but in terms of technically eating, you're allowed to technically eat. That's the piece that he says about Shabbat. Now let's talk about Passover. Who was reading for us? Roberta, do you want to keep on reading for us?
Sure. On the eve of Passover, it is forbidden to eat from the 10th hour and onwards, so that one eats matzah with appetite, although one can eat some fruits or vegetables, but should not fill up to satiety.
So the 10th hour is the same as 9 hours in the previous idea. It's the same time, right? The beginning, the 10th hour begins like
Okay.
it's kind of like the 16th centuries, the 1500s, right? Like the same idea, right? It's confusing.
Yes.
But the 10th hour begins at 9 hours and 1 minute. That's the 10th hour.
Yes.
So,
okay.
So from that period, it is forbidden to eat. This is exactly what we said. So this is exactly, mincha ketana was at 9.5 hours. We're now at 9 hours. So how are we interpreting the idea of samuch, of close to mincha? How are we interpreting it? How much time?
Half an hour.
Half an hour. Half an hour. Samuch means a half an hour. And that's, by the way, in other places in Gemara as well, where samuch, the term samuch, could imply a half an hour. So a half an hour before mincha, which is the later mincha time, you're not allowed to eat, so that you eat matzah with appetite. But he adds in a little bit. Roberta, did you finish? I don't remember if you finished it.
Okay. The table should be set the day before.
Wait, sorry. Let me just clarify one more point. Although one can eat, right? You can eat fruits and vegetables. If you just read the Mishnah, you wouldn't know that. All that it says is you cannot eat. You don't know. What does it mean to not eat? If you were a commentator on the Gemara, you would have to address that question. What does that mean to not eat? What is the definition of eating?
Okay.
What can you eat? What can't you eat? How much is considered eating? If you just taste a little bit of the soup that you're cooking, is that eating? Right? Those are the question mark situations. So what he clarifies for us is fruits and vegetables is fine, but more than that would not be okay. Keep on going, Roberta.
Okay. The table should be set the day before, so that one can eat right when it gets dark. He should not say Kiddush until it gets dark.
So that's another idea we saw in the Mishnah, that you should wait until dark to have your meal. Keep going.
One should set his table nicely with fancy dishes, as much as he is capable of, and prepare a place that he can sit and lean in the way of freedom.
Again, based on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that one has, even the poorest of Jews, has to recline. And last piece.
Last piece, even a poor person who is sustained through charity must sell his clothing or sell or rent himself in order to buy wine for the 4 cups.
That sounds quite extreme, but this is
It
also based on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, "Afilu min hatamcha," even the person who's supported by the charity plate has to have 4 cups of wine. So the Shulchan Aruch you see here adds in some details. Likely, if we follow the opinions of the commentators that come between the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, you probably see that line of thought continue until it gets to this version here. But you see here how he really codifies for us what to do to make sense, to take this Mishnah and this Gemara and now put it into practice. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I wonder how expensive 4 cups of wine were.
It's hard to know, but it's a good question.
So when everybody's running around at Pesach time, after you burn your chametz and the kids are running, what can I eat? We're going to starve all afternoon. So that kind of hits those hours, right? That's where it puts us for the day.
Well, so first of all, it's only from the 10th hour. I can
Okay,
look
so
online. I don't know exactly when the 10th hour is in Toronto. We can look, if you go to myzmanim.com, you can look for the time that says Mincha Katana, and it's a half an hour before that. It might even tell you. But you could always have fruits and vegetables. The point is that, again, we're thinking about matzah. We want to be excited about matzah. We want to appreciate the matzah. If you're full, then the matzah is just not enjoyable. Already some people find it hard to, really appreciate the matzah. So at least let's come at it with an appetite. So that's definitely the spirit of the law. And on Shabbat, even though it's technically not required, it's the same idea that we want to appreciate the Shabbat and the holidays that we're about to enter. And let's not have a full meal right before Shabbos, right? Let's really enjoy the feast that we're about to have. Any other final questions?
well, this year it coincides, so it is
Shabbat
Pesach and Shabbat. So we'll be able to bring this together.
Yeah, that works. So my goal here was really, over these 2 classes, for you to journey from the Mishnah and all the way to practical halacha. And you saw that journey. You saw the questions that were not clear from the Mishnah. We didn't answer all of them, but at least we asked a lot of them. And we discussed some of the approaches in the Gemara and all the way until the practical halacha today, which I find is just a fascinating journey. And it doesn't end here. The Shulchan Aruch has so many commentaries on that. There are so many people now that are asking, okay, how do I apply it in this situation in my life? What's considered a fruit? What's considered a vegetable, right? Like you can go on and on with these questions. And that's really what the oral Torah is all about. It begins with Mishnah, but it continues and continues. And we're still in it today. We're still continuing the oral conversations. So I find that very, very meaningful. So thank you for joining me on this journey. We're going to have one more class, which will be on a self-contained unit, something related to Masechet Pesachim, but its own unit, so it won't be building off of these 2. And thank you so much to you all for joining. If any of you want to stay on for any questions or comments, you're welcome to stay. But thank you very much for being here.